China isn't actually as high-tech as you may think. When you think of China these days, you probably think of high-tech, flashy cities, big skyscrapers, high-speed rails. The fact that most of the gadgets that you buy on Amazon and the little tech things that you get are all made in China. Well, even your iPhone is assembled in China. So China's pretty high-tech, right? Right? Wrong. So when you're posing on a motorcycle that's far too powerful and far too heavy for you, and you can't even reach the ground with both feet, you're gonna need a slim wallet, something that just fits right in those jeans. In fact, I can't think of any situation where a thinner, lighter, better, high-tech wallet isn't a good idea. Seriously guys, Extra wallets are fantastic and they keep upgrading their line. They've got more styles to choose from, classy, high-tech, they've got new lightweight materials that some of them are made of, and if you're worried about misplacing your wallet, you can now slip an AirTag into some of their models too. Right now, Extra is having another site-wide sale. Go to shop.extra.com/SerpentZA. You'll get an even better deal. Hop on it guys, this wallet has changed my life. Literally, I don't carry change anymore because there is no place for it and you don't need it. At checkout, don't forget to use the code SerpentZA for a massive discount. Get yourself an Extra wallet, they're awesome. And now back to the show. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's talk about the pen. Because as it turns out, the old adage that the pen is mightier than 130 years of Chinese innovation is true. I'm not trying to be facetious here. The ballpoint pen, something that's been around since I believe 1888, only recently was able to be manufactured in China. Now, okay, that's not entirely true. Most of the world's ballpoint pens do come from China and are manufactured and have been manufactured in China, right? But it's the tip. It's the actual little ball that moves around in a socket that China was unable to make. How recently did China make a ballpoint pen? Finally, how recently is it that China was able to manufacture this very well-known technology? 2017. I'm not making this up. You see, the way Chinese industry works is very little is ever spent on research and development or innovation. The majority of the time, intellectual property is simply stolen, copied, reverse engineered, and if it's not possible to do so, if it's too difficult, they just buy and outsource certain products which cannot be locally manufactured in China, the ballpoint pen tip being one of those things. You see, it's quite precise. That high tensile metal, the way it all fits together, the thinness of it, it was not something that the Chinese steel industry could produce or reproduce and recreate. So even though China was producing the majority of the world's ballpoint pens, they had to actually purchase the little tips from Germany, Switzerland and Japan. So there you have your manufacturing industry in China, the pen industry. They can of course put together the little plastic sheath, they can put together all the little bits and pieces that you need, but the actual tip, the ballpoint, they could not make themselves and had to import. And of course it's costly to import these parts. And it also means that China is not self-reliant. If suddenly trade routes get cut off, if trade deals get cancelled, they would no longer be able to make ballpoint pens. So what changed all this? Well, it got to a point where, in fact, the vice premier of China, Li Keqiang, made a speech where he said that when he tries to use Chinese-made ballpoint pens, the writing is very rough and inconsistent, and he called for a big change. And there was a lot of political spotlight thrust on the whole ballpoint pen industry. And it took 5 years of an incredible amount of resources, time, money for China to figure out the ballpoint pen. I mean, of course, they've been trying forever. They never really got it right. But when the political pressure was on and they were told you must create a domestic ballpoint pen, it took them 5 years of dedicated research and development. Now, I think we can all agree that a ballpoint pen is not as advanced as a microprocessor. And this is where China sits right now. You may have heard of this whole thing about chip embargoes, sanctions, big companies like ZTE, Huawei, and so on being banned from purchasing certain chips from America. And you probably think, that's a bit absurd. Why would they need to? China's this massive manufacturing country. They can surely just make their own chips. And that's the problem. They can't. Now, I have a technical background. I've always had an interest in electronics and computers and so on. And I used to live in Shenzhen, the so-called Silicon Valley of China. This is the tech hub. This is where all the technology comes from. This is where the technology is made. This is where your iPhones are put together. Everything in Shenzhen. So I used to go to the electronics market all the time. Of course, that's what you're seeing here is footage of me filming inside the electronics market. This is where you can buy almost anything that you need when it comes to electronics. But I'd like you to pay attention to what these people are doing here. And you see this all over. They're not innovating something here. What these ladies are doing here is stripping down technology, refurbishing and repurposing chips, ribbon cables, all kinds of components from existing technologies. You see this a lot. They'll be breaking down certain phones or tablets or old computer parts, and they'll be scavenging little bits and pieces that then can be reused or resold back into the market. Not only are they used in manufacturing new products, I'm talking quite low-end stuff here, of course, but creating new products, but also when you take your iPhone or something in to be repaired at one of the many places around Huajianbei there, they're going to need the little chip or the socket or the speaker or whatever, and so they need to have a supply of these spare parts, which they scavenge from existing technologies. To the outside observer, looking at all this technology around you and all these little bits and pieces, you probably think, wow, look at all this innovation, look at all this technology, it's very high tech. But as someone who understands technology, what you see is you see a reverse engineering sort of a setup here. You see a scavenging setup over here. People are taking existing parts and then reusing them and repurposing them. And that's what China's good at doing. You see, assembly, manufacture, this is something China's very good at doing. You have a lot of skilled workers who are very good at soldering things together and fitting things together. You've got very good, well laid out factories that can take care of almost anything. But it's the components that go into these phones, these tablets, these gadgets. Those are the things that China cannot make by themselves. Think of the ballpoint pen once again. Why would you spend the time to go and try and engineer a ballpoint pen's tip if you can just buy it elsewhere, or you can steal the intellectual property from other people? Now, of course, a lot of technologies have been stolen and reverse engineered. You can buy all sorts of generic Chinese chips that are reverse engineered versions of microcontrollers and things like that. I used to buy them all the time. You know, little Atmega microprocessors and so on and so forth. You can get them all there, but it's only the low-end chips that China is successful at producing. The more technologically advanced, the more intricate technologies, China just isn't there yet. And that's why dictator Xi Jinping has made it a big thing. He wants China to be self-reliant by 2025. He wants the Chinese chip industry to catch up to the rest of the world so they don't need to rely on overseas companies. They don't need to rely on Nvidia or Samsung or Intel or any of these other producers of chips and memory and so on. They want to be able to make everything in-house. And of course, they need to. Because if those supply lines are cut due to political tensions or war or anything like that, China will no longer be able to produce high-tech gadgets. They'll have a limit. They'll only be able to produce something up to a certain level and then no more. And China isn't catching up. Like many projects, the Chinese government thought that all they need to do is throw a lot of money at something and the problem will be solved. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. This top-down leadership is just rife with corruption. So you throw all that money out there and tons of little companies will suddenly spring up, pretending to be technology companies or research companies. And they'll take the money and that's it. They just take the money. Billions of dollars have been lost this way. There's huge investigations right now. Some of the biggest names in chip manufacturing in China are currently arrested and they're being put on trial. There's all sorts of terrible things happening as far as corruption is concerned. But the end result is that the Chinese chip manufacturing hasn't advanced, even though Xi Jinping put a priority on it. So what does this really mean for China's technology? Well, those flashy buildings, those high-speed rails, everything in China that looks high-tech and new and cutting-edge is basically built on the technology from other countries. And if China continues to go down the path it's going down right now, of being a bully, belligerent, and unfriendly, they're going to eventually lose those other countries' input. They're going to lose the technology. They're going to lose access to those chips and those manufacturers And that's going to leave China in a very, very bad situation. A situation where they can no longer produce cutting-edge, high-tech stuff, gadgets, phones, you name it. And so that's why China's putting so much pressure on the chip industry to try and catch up. But unfortunately, just like with the ballpoint pen, it's going to take a long time. You can only steal and reverse engineer so much. There's still certain things which really do take time. Innovation, research. And that is not China's strong point. It never has been. Not modern China anyway. So remember, if it takes 5 years to figure out how to make the tip of a ballpoint pen with the entire country's resources, I wonder how long it'll take to create a top-level chip, the type that are produced in Taiwan and America. Probably a lot longer than 5 years. I hope I've given you a little bit of insight into China's tech industry. I'm not trying to poo-poo it or belittle it. There are some fantastic things where China really is applying some pretty cutting-edge ideas to existing technologies, DJI drones, for instance. But remember that it's still all based on existing technologies that have been invented elsewhere. We still haven't seen any kind of innovation come out of China as far as technology is concerned. So when you see something flashy and high-tech in China, just remember, although it's made in China, it wasn't invented there. At least not yet. Until next time, guys, like the ballpoint pen, stay awesome.